We continue our look at the Invasion storyline 20 years later, and although this week's pay-per-view does look fine on paper, it is noticeably dampened by national tragedy. I'm talking about WWF Unforgiven 2001 from September 23rd at the Mellon Arena in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. This show was nominated by Calvin Atkinson and Harrison Moore over on patreon.com/wrestlingwithwregret. You know, it's going to be impossible to get around this, so we have to talk about it. This show, of course, is overshadowed by the fallout from the September 11th terror attacks. Those took place one day after Raw, and you know, for many years, I've kind of, the one thing I remember from the Raw before 9/11 was this moment where Austin throws Kurt Angle and RVD off the stage in the middle of their hardcore championship match, and that is a moment that for whatever reason has stuck with me for 20 years, because then I think about that, I think about, oh, the next day at school when everything changed, you know? Then of course there's the SmackDown after 9/11, which is non-canon, and there's no storyline progression, but it is still a very significant show in SmackDown's history because it is the first public gathering of that size since the terror attacks. And of course the show is probably best known though for Stephanie McMahon's faux pas where she compared the 9/11 attacks to when the federal government sued her dad. You know, it's been a long time and my memory is kind of fuzzy, but I do remember that after 9/11 happened, you know, as a kid watching this stuff, I do remember kind of my love of a lot of things just kind of like being skewed for a while, being kind of altered, where it's like it's hard to find joy in stuff like this after what had happened. But when you look back at the product 20 years later and removed from all these raw, fresh memories and emotions, the product is pretty unaffected by what happens. I mean, there's a SmackDown after 9/11, and then they have like the opening with Raw the next following Monday where they say it's time to move on and yay America. And then for a long time, the entrance ramp has the American flag there for a regular basis. But besides that, a lot of the booking and a lot of the storytelling is largely, you know, protected. I think that the product is pretty insulated from what happens in the real world, even though it is definitely impacting, you know, viewers' just like moods and attitudes and stuff. The product itself, after the SmackDown after 9/11, feels relatively kind of like stays the course and unaffected by the tragedy. But how can you concentrate on anything going on in the outside world when this show's got the three-headed Steve Austin? The theme of the show is how insane Austin has become. Sweet Jesus, that thing's terrifying. And we have to see that thing all night too. Can you imagine like being Steve Austin and being in the ring before the doors open, like they're kind of doing rehearsals and run-throughs and everything, and they're testing all the videos on the set, and you look up and you see that horrifying monstrosity of yourself? How crazy would that be? I forgot to mention in my SummerSlam review, by the way, Austin is in full-on what mode at this point. Started happening just before SummerSlam, but now it's really picked up and it's all he does. I have to admit, Austin doing the what stuff and like interrupting people and himself with what is hilarious, and I maintain what I said in the SummerSlam review, that heel Austin and the leader of the Alliance is actually pretty golden. But of course, once the crowd starts doing it, it's ruined forever. Also at this point, the Alliance and Team WWF are beginning to interact with each other in fun and interesting ways, not necessarily confrontational or fighting or sneak attacks. It's like backstage interactions and stuff. You know, sometimes there's dealings going on, or there's kind of like razzing each other and stuff. It's really interesting. It's almost like this cartoon world where these two camps are forced to begrudgingly coexist in the same world together, and they're just kind of like, well, we're just kind of going about our day and stuff. Also, there begins to be some infighting within the Alliance, which sometimes it does make sense, but sometimes it doesn't. Like, you've got this moment where RVD is feuding with Raven for no reason, but that jumps off into RVD threatening to usurp Steve Austin's power and influence in the Alliance, which is a whole other story. We'll get to that in a little bit. 13,855 people in the arena, 350,000 buys. It's way down from 603,000 the previous year, but in fairness, so was every other Unforgiven in existence. Jim Ross and Paul Heyman of the Alliance are on commentary here. Jennifer Holliday sings America the Beautiful, and then we go to our opening match, a four-way elimination for the WWF tag titles, as the Dudley Boyz defend against the Hardy Boys, the Big Show and Spike Dudley, and Lance Storm and the Hurricane. That's right, it's the pay-per-view debut of one of my favorite things about the Alliance and the Invasion storyline, the Hurricane. Shane Helms has embraced his inner superhero, and now he thinks he's a full-fledged superhero. He comes out with a cape and face paint like a mask and everything. There's a video of him flying around on his Titantron like he's Superman. It's hilarious. He wins the European Championship on the first night he debuts the gimmick, and it's almost immediately over like gangbusters, because it's just so funny how he's dove into this thing, he's so committed to it, and how other people play the straight man around him. Like Lance Storm was the perfect straight man for foil, counterpart to Hurricane Helms here, and how Storm thinks, oh, you're just doing this as kind of a way to poke fun and make a statement, but Hurricane truly believes he's a hero and stuff, and Storm just cannot make sense of this. And so I think it just works so well, and even though he's part of the heel team, the baddie team, he is one of the most popular things in the product right now. Also, it's worth pointing out this time, Hurricane is looking for a sidekick, and he's been eyeing Spike's girlfriend, Molly Holly, and well, we'll see where that goes. The Dudleys did regain the tag titles after Kronik helped them and cost Undertaker and Kane, but that is a story for a little bit later in this review. Matt and Hurricane trade off at first, Hurricane with the Hurra pose, and Matt gives it back to him. Spike gets worked over by Storm for a bit. Nice double team with he and Hurricane. Bubba and Devon launch Spike about 40 feet in the air. Hurricane puts on the cape and JR says, it's so early for the cape. JR says Big Show wants that tag as badly as he wants a double cheeseburger. Get it? Cause he's big and kind of fat. Hardy Boys hit some dives and Spike dives off of Show's shoulders onto all of them. Big Show teasing his spot, but he gets cut off. The fans boo. Show chokeslams Storm to eliminate he and Helms. Matt with the twist of fate on Spike, and we're down to the Hardys and the Dudleys. Matt with a big moonsault to the outside onto Bubba and Devon. He goes to the twist of fate, but he's hit with a 3D instead. Jeff hits the swanton to break up the pin, and as the referee checks on him, Bubba hits his bomb onto Matt. Devon covers to win and retain. I give it 2.5 stars out of 5. The real fun of this match took place in the first half of it when all four teams were there and you had Spike Dudley getting thrown around and Hurricane doing his shtick. Once those teams were gone and it was down to the Hardys and the Dudleys, it just felt like another tag team match. Not too much exciting, nothing really too special about the latter half of the match. But be that as it may, the match itself on the whole did a good job getting the crowd fired up. Hardcore champion Rob Van Dam enters the arena and runs into ECW owner Stephanie McMahon. She offers her services to be at ringside for his match against Chris Jericho, but RVD says he's got it covered. He says he wants a big dressing room to fit his massive ego, and Steph lets him have the pick of the litter. Over at ringside, Michael Cole interviews the family of Kurt Angle. There's Mama Angle. There's brother Dave. Cole asks Dave if Kurt should go through with the match despite not being medically cleared, but Dave says, hey, Kurt won a gold medal with a broken neck, so he should be fine here, though I'm not sure that's how it works. A grudge match up next as Perry Saturn takes on Raven. So many interesting romances during the Invasion storyline. There's Spike and Molly, there's Tori Wilson and Tajiri, and then there's this one of Perry Saturn and his mop, Moppy. Of course, Perry was getting hit in the head a few too many times, went a little loopy, falls in love with the mop, and he dumps Terry as a result. But then Moppy goes missing before SummerSlam. It's gone for weeks, and then it's revealed that Terry and Raven committed the mop napping. Yes, it's the infamous wood chipper scene where Raven tries to cover for when the wood chipper jams, and he just stands there and shrugs. It's amazing. We go to the match, Terry grabbing Saturn on the outside. That allows Raven to take advantage, hits the Russian leg sweep into the barricade to take over. JR on commentary points for him because he brings up their history in WCW about how they were former tag team champions together as part of the Flock. Nice little nugget of info there, Jim. The crowd's totally dead for this as Raven works the Cobra Clutch, knocks him out of the ring a couple times. Saturn now bleeding above the eye as he begins to make his comeback. Saturn finally gets the audience to make some kind of noise by yelling, "Ah!" but they quiet down immediately again after that. Saturn goes for a Hurricane Rana, but Raven fights him off and hits a clothesline. An awkward moment here where Saturn grabs the legs and seems to forget what he's doing next. We get the slingshot, then the three-handled family Gradunza by Saturn for the win. I give it 1 star out of 5. They tried. They really tried their best here to get the crowd to feel some kind of emotion, but they just couldn't do anything. And I think the crowd, being as dead as they were, actually kind of affected this match as well. I try not to let the crowd factor into my decision or my grading of matches, but it's hard to ignore just how dead the crowd is for this. And I don't know, because at the time when I was a kid watching this, I loved this angle. I loved Perry Saturn's gimmick. I thought Moppy was hilarious. Him saying "you're welcome" was funny. And it just didn't pay off. I guess it didn't translate to fans wanting to see Perry get revenge on Raven like that. Or maybe they're saving their energy for Kurt Angle later in the night. I don't know. Backstage, Lillian Garcia with Christian. She asks if it's been worth it to destroy his relationship with his brother Edge. Christian says he thinks about the people out there who fail to live their hopes and dreams, like the people of Pittsburgh, for example. He says he is superior to Edge and will win the Intercontinental title tonight, and says, was it worth it? You're damn right it was. On we go now to the brother versus brother encounter, which we all saw coming a mile away since King of the Ring. It's Christian versus Edge for Edge's Intercontinental Championship. Like I mentioned, this came after weeks of Christian being visibly jealous of Edge's success, wants to share the glory with him even though he's done nothing to show for it. He finally snaps after failing to win the WCW title from The Rock. He attacks Edge later in the night and debuts the one-man concerto, taking Edge out for several weeks. He also debuts that hot new theme, Christian! Christian, the opera theme. That's so great. Although, you know what? I'm a big fan of the original. There's the one that debuted on Unforgiven, the one that people more closely associate with this song. But the one I remember is the OG version, the dun 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 dun. When you hear it now, it just makes no sense. And also the opera part of that is just way more intense and insane than what they eventually settle on for the theme that everyone knows. Edge also has a new theme. Yeah, my Durango, number 95. It's Never Gonna Stop by Rob Zombie. You know, it's funny because when you watch the first few weeks of Edge this theme, he doesn't do anything like, you associate Edge's entrance with him kind of running around and jumping and doing the hands thing. He's doing none of that shit at this point. He's not quite found his character yet, but he's still kind of, he maintains kind of stoic when he makes his entrance and stuff. He's not quite hopping around yet. They fight at the onset, make their way up the ramp and to the stage. Edge slingshots Christian into the set, back in the ring, repeatedly ramming Christian's heads into the turnbuckles, but then Christian pulls Edge into the ring post and begins to take over. Edge on the top rope goes for an intentional flying nothing. Christian moves, but Edge hits him with a suplex anyway. Edge with a cut under his eye. We get a mid-air collision and both men are down. Christian throws Edge out of the ring, but Edge crawls underneath and through, gets the jump on Christian with a top rope cross body. Christian with a spear and a 2 count. He's frustrated and grabs some chairs, wants to do the one-man concerto, but Edge fights out of it. Christian smashing his own face with the chair. You can see him bleeding when the match is over. Edge goes to the concerto himself, but the referee stops him. Christian with a low blow and the roll-up to steal the title. I give this one 3.5 stars out of 5. I really enjoyed the story in this one. They really explored the space here. Christian is just one of the best at being a sleazy, sneaky heel, and he really shines in that way in this matchup. And for him to win the title here, his first singles gold since being the light heavyweight champion years before this, I think is a real big jumping off point for him. Edge is so, I feel he's so secure in his place right now on the card. If he loses the title here, it's not going to affect him. And Christian winning the championship, though, immediately legitimizes him as a singles guy. And with that done, time to look at my notes and see what match is next. Oh no! It's The Undertaker and Kane defending the WCW tag titles against Kronik. You know what sucks about this match? I had to watch it twice for the purpose of this review. I watched it once, and then later in the day, Jay Biggs shows up to record the podcast. And one of the first things he says to me is, hey, I heard you're reviewing Unforgiven. Can we watch The Undertaker and Kane and Kronik match? I just finished watching that before you came in the door. You gotta make me watch it again? Why did you hurt me? So Steven Richards has come back to TV after a long absence. He blames The Undertaker for Right to Censor being disbanded, and he wants a piece of the American badass. Taker comes out, but then Brian Adams and Brian Clark show up and beat him up. Adams and Clark, the former Crush and Atom Bomb respectively, are back in the company, much to the chagrin of many people there apparently, but The Undertaker vouched for them because he's friends with Adams, so they're back. After they cost Taker and Kane the WWF tag titles, they make their case to Shane McMahon to join the alliance, and Shane's like, oh, I've been watching you guys for a long time, I'm really impressed with what you do. Wait a minute, weren't they part of the company you bought earlier in the year? We're backstage with the champs. Taker calls Adams and Clark muscled up statues, then says we'll see what happens when they go eye to eye with the dragon, and that they'll take a muscle-bound man and drop his face in the sand. He's a poet and didn't even know it. Steven at ringside for the match with his jet black hair. What, has he got a gig on Arrow coming up? Here we go. The fight begins in earnest on the outside. Taker and Adams inside the ring as the match is underway. Heyman says Kane can't be trusted because he's wearing a mask, and JR goes, well, you're wearing a baseball cap, and Heyman goes, you're wearing a cowboy hat. What the hell's that gonna do with anything? Adams struggles mightily to hit Kane with any kind of offense, elbow, backbreaker, you name it. Clark with a lot of kicks and stomps to Kane, and they all look really bad. Kane with a not great looking shoulder breaker, and in comes the Undertaker. Taker hits the old school, then a bad looking cross arm breaker. Adams on top of Taker for a bit. Taker begins to come back, but it just goes so wrong. It can't be overstated just how every spot in this match, every move has at least one thing slightly off with it. And it's a matter of degrees, because some of them they look kind of weird but not terrible, and some they look really terrible. Even the Irish whips look like shit in this match. Crush gently caresses the ring post with his shoulder as Atom Bomb dives onto Taker on the outside. Taker with a hot tag, and he tells him to feed. We get our second or third shitty backbreaker or sidewalk slam of the match. Undertaker fights off Richards, screams at Adams to cut him off.
Richards tried to...
Taker fights out of the high times. Kane with a clothesline to Adams. Taker with a chokeslam to Clark. The match is mercifully over. Richards eats a chokeslam from Kane afterward, which is honestly the best move of the match. As the old saying goes, fuck this match, 0 stars. This was so bad from beginning to end, and except for Stevie Richards, everyone involved had a hand in making the match as bad as it was. Kronik were out of shape and were the drizzling shits. The Undertaker, to me, came off as pretty unprofessional, as shouting spots and commands at Kronik while, even though they deserved it, he shouldn't have done that as loud as he was doing. Kane was there. He was the least offensive of the bunch, but he still screwed up a couple of moves here and there. There was no heat, there was no struggle, just 4 big guys like hitting each other with moves and barely registering any of them. Like, I like beefy big boy battles, don't get me wrong, but you gotta have some kind of like oomph and struggle in there, and there was none here. This match was the opposite of fun. This marks the end of the 2-week experiment of Kronik in the WWF. They were called into a meeting with Jim Ross afterward, and they were basically told, hey, you gotta shape up in developmental or you're gone. Brian Clark saw that as a slap in the face, and he walked. Adams tried to make it work. He went to Heartland Wrestling Association for a while before he was ultimately released. Kronik would show up again in World Wrestling All-Stars and in All Japan, but for one bright shining moment, they got to have the absolute worst match of the year in the WWF. Booker T looking into his hand as Shane pumps him up. Here comes Taz, who's all rah-rah about the handicap match for the WCW title later. Taz mentions how Stephanie pinned The Rock on SmackDown, so it looked really bad if Shane and Booker couldn't do it. Shane and Booker tell him to leave. God, if there's one thing that really grinded my gears during the Invasion storyline during this time, was Taz's booking. I was a huge fan of Taz, growing up and seeing him in WWF. I always wanted to see him do better than he was. But, he's so inconsistent in the booking for this, because one week he's a homer for the Alliance, next week he talks shit or gets in trouble for something he says or does where he kind of like thinks for himself and it pisses off the Alliance, he gets beat up for it, and he's good with the team, he's bad with the team, and for weeks everyone wants to see him break for the Alliance and do his own thing. We get so many brief glimpses of that happening, but nothing ever really pulls, the trigger's never pulled on that. It's never fully actualized, and that was so frustrating, is how inconsistent it was. As a 16-year-old watching this, it was very infuriating. Stephanie's backstage looking for Rob Van Dam. Coach tells her he's in dressing room 5. Steph shouts into the door instead of just knocking and walking in, very organic. She says her birthday's coming up tomorrow, so she says RVD beating Jericho would be a great gift. Then she makes some kind of vague reference to having it be a pleasurable time in the Alliance if he wins, some kind of sexual here. Chris Jericho then shows up behind her, says she slept with a bunch of guys, comments on her breasts, then leaves. But apparently RVD wasn't even in the locker room. He was in the gorilla position getting ready for the next match for the Hardcore Championship as Van Dam defends against Chris Jericho. Van Dam has fast become the top babyface within the Alliance. He's been put in a position to really challenge Austin's position as the leader. Like I said, he has people going to him for advice and such. Austin is very visibly just upset with Van Dam, has beat him up on a couple of occasions as well. As for Jericho, still feuding with Stephanie. There's fast-paced action to start off. Gets a little hectic at one point, but they do recover. RVD does the thumbs, but Jericho slaps him in the face. A backdrop attempt seems to go awry, turns into a flapjack maybe. Fight on the outside. RVD goes for a spinning leg drop on the barricade, but Jericho moves. That doesn't happen often. Jericho brings out a ladder, and it's on the attack. Back in the ring, Jericho with a suplex on the ladder. RVD returning the favor. Jericho goes to the walls, but RVD powers out. Van Dam avoids the lion saw, hits a big spinning kick, goes to the 5-star frog splash, but Jericho moves again. Jericho with a cut on his eye. It's eye cut-o-mania tonight. He grabs the ladder, gets dropped, toe held into it, and fuck that. RVD atop the ladder. Jericho just hucks the chair into his face. We get a tarantula on the ladder. Jericho shoves RVD to the floor, goes for a dive, then eats shit on the barricade. RVD goes for a dive of his own, but Jericho intercepts him with the chair. Back in the ring, Jericho counters a pinfall into an armbar. He whomps RVD with a chair. Stephanie McMahon comes in and grabs the chair. Jericho swings for her but misses, turns around and eats a Van Daminator, the 5-star frog splash, and no one gets as high as Rob Van Dam as he pins and retains. I give it 4 stars out of 5. It is my favorite match of the evening. It starts off a little ropey at first, a little kind of like clunky, and then by the end it just recovers in a big way here. And after the last match we saw, this feels amazing. Another pep talk with Shane and Booker T. Booker practices holding up 6 fingers instead of 5. Well, that right there is a dead giveaway. He's not winning because doing this isn't nearly as cool as doing this. Booker leaves. Shane then imagines himself as the WCW champion. He could be in it for himself. Well, 4 months ago, Jim Ross said very confidently on commentary that match with Kurt Angle, King of the Ring, may be the last time you see Shane McMahon in a WWF ring. And tonight, he's fighting for the WCW Championship as he and Booker T challenge The Rock in a handicap match. Basically a continuation of what began before SummerSlam. The Rock has mocked Booker T by having a little person dressed as him. They make fun of his repeated use of the word sucka. Big Show even impersonates him at one point. And you know what? Big Show wearing the fro and talking in the affectation allegations is one thing. That's fine, but thank God he didn't wear blackface is all I'm saying. Shane with his special jersey, you the sucker, got him. Rock starts off by trying to go for pinfalls. Shane keeps breaking them up. Shane and Booker are able to do some sneaky work that allows Shane to start working on the Rock, but Rocky shrugs it off, goes for a sharp shooter, but Booker makes the save. Shane with some cheap shots on the Rock on the outside, dives on the barricade onto him. Shane even gives him a bit of the ring post-itis, as Gallows and Anderson might have once said. Referee Nick Patrick very much lenient toward the heels, of course. Booker with the spinner-rooney, but the Rock goes for a roll-up, almost cost Booker again. Back on the outside, some fighting on the Spanish announce table. We get a double down as Shane grabs the WCW title, goes to deck Rocky, but he hits Booker instead. Rock comes back, hits a double clothesline and a DDT to Booker. Shane hits him, does the kip up like the Rock, goes for the Shane-O elbow, but the Rock has none of it. Rock bottom to Shane, spinebuster to Booker. In comes Test, who decks the Rock, hits the big boot. Referee lets it all go. Bradshaw comes running and chases Test out of the arena. WWE ref Mike Chioda comes out and calls Patrick out on his terrible officiating, yoinks Patrick out of the ring. Patrick shoves Chioda, then Mike fights back. The Patrick flop! Booker takes out Chioda, goes to the bookend. We get the Rock bottom instead. Then Earl Hebner warriors his way to the ring and makes a 3 count. The Rock wins and retains. I give it 3.5 stars out of 5. I like the story with this one a lot better than at SummerSlam, because where at SummerSlam it's like the Rock's coming to take the title and there's nothing Booker T can do about it. At least this time there seems to be a bit of some odds headed toward the Rock's way with the champion, with the handicap factor put in that. And the story in the match I thought was told pretty well as well, like the referee fight happening and Test getting involved and Bradshaw making the save for that. This was just better done and more entertaining in a lot of ways than the match at SummerSlam, we'll just say. And this is also the beginning of Booker T and Test beginning their own tag team down the line. We're in GM Willie Reeg's office as Tajiri gets ready for his match against Rhyno. Regal wants all outside parties banned from ringside, but Torrie Wilson says, pretty please, and Regal allows it. Meanwhile, in WWF New York, Stacy Keibler rubs a guy's smooth face, and she's all like, look at this, and it's footage of her shaving her legs in the bath. Yep. That's a woman shaving her legs. Then afterwards, she asks the crowd, what do you think, New York? And the crowd's like, woo, yeah, shaving legs. What a bizarre cutaway this was. You know, one negative side effect to the Alliance storyline, the invasion, is all these championships from WCW came over in the purchase. They have all these belts, and like at least one belt changes hands a week, it seems, on average. So I kind of forgot who the U.S. champion was, that this match was for the title, as Tajiri defends it against Rhyno. Tajiri did beat Kane recently on TV to win the title, and not only that, he actually has an on-air relationship beginning with Torrie Wilson from the Alliance. And so JR on commentary here is hilarious. I don't get this interfaction relationship with Torrie Wilson and Tajiri. It makes no sense to me. Like everyone's talking, oh, it's Torrie Wilson, she's part of the Alliance, so you can't really trust her, but she's a nice girl. But what does she see in Tajiri? It's like they're doing everything they can to avoid making fun of the fact that they're culturally very different. It's, oh, the Alliance and WWF. That's so wacky that they're dating now. Tajiri on top early with some kicks, but Rhyno buries his shoulders into Tajiri's injured ribs and gets to work. Rhyno goes for a powerbomb. Tajiri gets out of that and hits a Hurricane Rana. Nice springboard elbow. Rhyno with a spine buster. Torrie gets on the apron and Rhyno chasing his fellow Alliance member around. Torrie appears to hurt her ankle in the chase. Rhyno teases a gore to Torrie, but Tajiri kicks him right in the face. Tajiri turns an octopus hold into a tarantula hold for a moment. Rhyno dodges the buzzsaw kick, suplexes Tajiri, hits the gore to win, and becomes the new U.S. champion. I give it 2 stars out of 5. Fairly short match. Tajiri did a good job, you know, kind of like being a formidable opponent to Rhyno, but he was selling the rib injury, fairly academic. And Rhyno winning the U.S. title here feels kind of like, I don't want to say consolation prize, but it feels like kind of redemption or validation for him and how they're pushing him in this storyline right now as one of like kind of the upper mid-card guys in the Alliance. So it's a good win for him. On we go now to our main event as Stone Cold Steve Austin defends against Kurt Angle, and whoo boy, shit escalated real quick from SummerSlam to now. At SummerSlam, these two had a hell of a contest that saw Kurt survive 3 stunners and still not get put away, only for Austin to get himself DQ'd. The next night on Raw is Austin Appreciation Night, which famously ends with Angle ripping off the Austin beer truck moment with his own milk truck attack, Milk-O-Mania running wild. Stone Cold steals Kurt Angle's gold medals, then dumps him off a bridge in St. Louis. The next week on Raw, Kurt assaults Stone Cold and kidnaps him, threatens to throw him over a bridge in revenge. He gets Austin to beg and cry for mercy, forcing him to accept his challenge for a title match at Unforgiven. Then Kurt pushes him into a kiddie pool, but like, how did Kurt get the kiddie pool there? Was he in like cahoots with somebody? Did somebody set it up behind him? Or did he leave the kiddie pool there and then drive around for a while hoping nobody would like pick it up or run over it? Austin then spends a couple of weeks trying to straight up murder Angle out of revenge. First he throws Angle off the stage and onto the floor after Kurt wins the hardcore title, in which he also throws RVD off the stage. Then 9/11 happens, there's a brief pause in the storytelling, and then when it continues, Kurt beats Austin in a tag team match. And then on the SmackDown before before Unforgiven, the first half hour of this show is so hard to watch because the first big portion of it is just Austin screaming at Tori Wilson for dating Tajiri. He's just yelling at her in the ring, making her cry. Tajiri tries to make a save. He stops Tajiri. Angle tries to make a save. He pile drives Kurt Angle on the floor on the exposed concrete, possibly breaking his neck again. It's a very like, oh my God, hushed tones. This is real. Angle, you hear him saying he can't feel anything. All this serious stuff happens there. But by the end of the night, he does recover. He tears off the neck brace and says he will compete at Unforgiven. And oh yeah, since 9/11 is still fresh in everyone's minds, it does add a lot of weight to Angle's current position of being billed as this all-American hero. I talked about that last time in the SummerSlam review. Now the context and the vibe of it takes on this whole new meaning with 9/11 having happened, and there is a general feeling among Americans of a togetherness and unity in the wake of that. So like everyone's like rallying for Angle to win because he embodies America. The match starts with a brawl on the outside, finally fighting back in the ring. Angle hits a superplex out the gate but appears to jostle his neck ever so. Austin locks in a sleeper but Kurt drops him. Austin leaves the ring, tries to leave the arena, but Angle chases him up the ramp. He throws Austin off the ramp onto the floor, stomping on him afterward for good measure. Angle carries Austin back to the ring and the beating continues. Angle tears off some of the padding on the floor with evil intentions. Austin cuts him off. They each try to pile drive each other, but it backfires for both men. Fighting back in the ring, Austin attacking Kurt's neck. Austin goes outside and flips off Karen Angle in the front row, making her wrestling pay-per-view debut on this night. Austin back with a chin lock, working Angle over for a while. Heyman on commentary saying the match shouldn't be happening because it was made under duress, and he says, "My father is a lawyer, so this is very illegal." Angle hits Austin with 3 straight German suplexes, but he takes a lot out of himself in the process. Austin with a spine buster and is back on top. Referee pushed out of the way, so Angle takes him to Dick Kick City. Angle is the DDT, and both men are down for a bit. Angle with his own Stone Cold Stunner, but there's a kick out. The straps are down. Angle goes for the Angle Slam, but Austin hits one of his own, kinda. 2 count. Austin fighting for another pile driver, finally hits it. Angle somehow kicks out. Austin now going crazy, just pummeling Kurt. The crowd getting kind of restless here though. Goes for the stunner, but Angle catches him at the ankle lock. Austin is through the ropes, but the ref does not tell him to break the hold. Austin taps out and Kurt wins the title for his hometown of Pittsburgh, for the WWF, and for America. The family come to the ring. The roster celebrates with him. Everybody happy as the show goes off the air. Ooh, this one's hard for me to grade, man. I think this one, I'm going to give it 2.5 stars out of 5. This one does not have the same feel as SummerSlam at all. I felt more emboldened for Angle after SummerSlam than I did after this show, and he wins the championship on this show in his hometown. It does feel like slower and more of a struggle than what we saw at SummerSlam, and I don't know how much that has to play into Angle selling the neck injury, so he has to be a bit slower or what. Also, it's a tainted victory for Angle, so it's kind of hard to watch and go, oh, I feel good about that, because Austin had the rope break. That's an out. That is a way to kind of like delegitimize Angle's victory. So it doesn't feel as good to have him win and being bopped around and, and celebrate with his family and the roster and whatnot. I wonder how much 9/11 played a role in Angle winning this one, because he dropped the title back to Austin like 2 weeks later on television. It's a really underwhelming reign, and for all the effort and all the build of Angle being this total indomitable badass in the spirit of America, for him to lose the title 2 weeks later on television back to Austin, like it totally undoes everything they did in the build in SummerSlam and Unforgiven. My grade for Unforgiven 2001 is a C+, and the quality of pay-per-views in this arc takes a huge dive for the first time since I've been reviewing these shows. This is a show that offers you no real surprises, and nothing really amazing happened except for Angle winning at the end, but even then you feel shortchanged because of the finish being a little bit tainted. The crowd was dead for so much of this show, and I don't know if it's the booking or just they're saving their energy for Kurt, or maybe 9/11 and the vibes from that still plays a role into their overall enthusiasm, but so far for the invasion storyline, this is a pay-per-view you can skip because really a lot of it means nothing afterward. Well, next time on the Classic Review segment, once again, we step away from the invasion storyline and we go to somewhere else in the timeline that's not the WWF in 2001. We've seen a couple of WCW shows in the last couple of weeks between the invasion storylines. Let's give ECW, the other side of the alliance, a fair shake in this one. We're looking at Anarchy Rules 1999. I'm Brian Zane, and I'll see you next time.